Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness. I am your host, Melissa Oatman from melissaoatman.com. I am so excited today because we have with us a very special guest. We have Miss Amanda Monnier, and she is an energy healer and also a podcast host. She hosts the podcast Upleveled as F. Sounds intriguing. I can't even say the whole name on here, but I cannot wait to go and listen to some episodes because she is going to be talking to us today about how to work through trauma and how much trauma impacts our energy. And as an energy healer, I totally believe that is true. And so I cannot wait to dive into that topic. As many of you know, I own two dogs and I love them dearly. Nala and Nate can be quite a handful. You've even heard Nala sometimes want to join in the podcast. Well, I love dogs. I'm a huge dog lover, of course, and I know many of you are too. So if you're like me, a dog owner and dog lover, then you will love this new podcast that I came across. It's called Jack Russell Parents. Becca and Gabe host this weekly podcast, and it is devoted to celebrating Jack Russell Terrier dogs and companionship with canines of every kind. Every Monday, they explore hilarious, humbling, heartfelt, and harrowing stories that only dog parents can truly relate to, with such topics as, is your dog a kleptomaniac? I know I certainly can relate to that with Nala. And to brighten the end of each week, every Thursday, they drop a Zoomisode, a fast-paced mini-episode highlighting new and exciting stories from dog-centric entertainment and social media. If you're a dog lover and you just want to have fun, then you won't want to miss out on the Jack Russell Parent Podcast. It's a heartfelt good time. And you can connect with Jack Russell Parents at jackrussellparents.com or on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at JRT Podcast. All right, well, I am so excited to get started today, Amanda. I want to thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yes, I'm super excited for this conversation because I talk to energy healers sometimes, but I'm an energy healer myself. So anytime I can have a conversation with a fellow energy healer and gain new perspectives, I'm all about it. And I'm really excited about this topic. But before we get into the topic itself, I would love it if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and then how did you start doing energy work and what led you to this life of helping others? I think it's an awesome thing.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. If someone would have said a year and a half ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing today full time, I would have been like, okay, you're crazy. So I mean, growing up, I was just I did the basic things. Like my parents did divorce when I was young. And so when we get into the trauma stuff, I'll share some stuff that ended up coming up, some core wounds because of that. And I did the thing where you pick a major and you get the college degree and I ended up actually in law enforcement, which was, it was definitely part of my journey, but it was not like my life purpose. So I ended up in law enforcement, did that for about 6 years. And during that time in law enforcement, I had a spiritual awakening to where I just started questioning everything. I started questioning life. I'm like, gosh, it just seems like everybody's like kind of like on autopilot. Like we're just kind of doing like robotic stuff here. And something just didn't feel right to me. And I didn't know why. And it felt that way for quite some time. And so I had this dark night of the soul, if you will, where it triggered by a breakup, actually. So a lot of this just emotional pain, and it surfaced, and it was like there was like no escaping it. Like all the things that I had done to try to externally escape the pain that I had been holding in my energy field, my body. It was like, okay, well, we have to start addressing this. And so I've since learned many things along my journey, but I started looking, for all these different things to help me understand what was going on. So books, workshops, courses. And I was like, okay, like, it just seems like I never really resonated with Western medicine. I was like, there's just gotta be a way to holistically really just get to the place to where you're just feeling good and like I've always felt like life shouldn't suck. So it was just this process that I went through for, well, I mean, we're still always growing and evolving, right? But throughout my career in law enforcement, it was very interesting as well, because I hid in the spiritual closet. Like nobody really knew this side of me, because it wasn't something like it would have been, I mean, I was always kind of thought of, I think, as kind of like an outlier. Like I'd come into like meetings with like green drinks and people would have like donuts and coffee, and people were like, okay, there's Monnier again with her like $18 green juice. And so, I mean, it was just kind of like, I always felt like I didn't fit into the like societal mold that we're kind of conditioned to partake in. And so I started to ask questions, and I started understanding why. And so I got into different types of energy healing modalities that really helped. Like everything served its purpose. I look back now, I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I probably wouldn't have approached it then, but at that moment in time, it was like perfect for where I was at on my journey, and was able to really get to the bottom of some of this stuff. And like the one main thing that if I can, articulate this to listeners, is you're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. And it's just a misconception based on the things we're told growing up. And so it's like, we're always searching for all these external things to make us whole. And it's just not true. All the density that happens, and that we accumulate, and that the stories we subscribe to just simply aren't actually innately us. And so that was like one of the main things that I had learned throughout this process. So it's been a journey.
It's so funny because a lot of what you're saying is very similar to what happened to me when I had my spiritual awakening too. So I understand all of that, and how our life experiences really do help shape us and help us in our future endeavors. So that's really interesting. So you've gotten into healing work, you've gone through the spiritual awakening. So what made you decide to start helping others?
So I feel like I've always had this affinity for helping other people. And I've had to really get to this place of balance and boundaries, because I would do it to my detriment. Like I'm very sensitive. So like I feel so deeply. So it would be a situation to where I would, when I first started my career in law enforcement, I would come home and I'd feel so dense and I couldn't breathe. And I didn't realize and know that I was actually taking on the energy of everybody around me. And there's some really dense energy that is in that field. There's a lot of people who have had a lot of trauma, a lot of just low vibrational energies. Like you're going into the jails, and I was a probation officer. So you're supervising people who have already come on at the tail end, like serving their time in the community. So it was just learning how to, learning it like from the ground up, like kind of how energy really works, and understanding some of these things that we're just not taught this. We're not taught how this stuff works, and how, what it means to even be an empath and be sensitive to energy. Because I do feel we all have intuitive gifts. It's just a matter of like using that intuition muscle. And some of us have, we're not taught that, we haven't tapped into it. So it's just new information, and it's a whole new, because the way that our external reality, the way we see it, is like based on all of our thoughts, beliefs about what is true. And it's just getting reflected back. It's like a feedback loop, getting reflected back at us again and again. And we can actually choose to shift that into a whole different reality. If we want to, if we choose to. And then it's just, the inner work can oftentimes be releasing the resistance and the old programming, the trauma, and the dense energy from our energy field.
Yeah. And so speaking of trauma, I also had parents who divorced when I was very young, 30. So I know how much, like I had a bunch of abandonment issues and everything else going on, which is like a whole topic for like 50 podcast episodes. It goes so deep. So how do you work with people, or how can you show people how trauma is affecting their energy, and how they can maybe do some things to help correct that or to fix that?
So I would say, especially if you're new to this kind of stuff, we always one of the main things you can be doing is, instead of responding, just pausing. So if there's something going on that is, I use the word either activate or trigger, that's activating or triggering you to where you're having this response. Like, let's say for an example, it is a romantic relationship and you're having this, constant cyclical, maybe it's yelling or whatever it is, and it's activating something within you. We oftentimes, and I get it, I've done it too, like we oftentimes want to be like, play the victim card, or we want to blame the other person. But if it's creating a response in your body and there's not a neutrality to it, there could be something to see. And most of the time there is. And so one of like the easiest things, and like a little tidbit I can, share that's really helped me, is again, just pausing. Instead of reacting and responding, we can take a minute and we can look at the situation of, okay, what is this showing me? How can I see this from a higher perspective and consciously move through this rather than unconsciously move through it? Because when we unconsciously moving through something, we're oftentimes moving through it in our stories, in our wounding, and this energy comes up, and then it's like, the back and forth, and we're not really getting anywhere. But when we take a step back, and you can even close your eyes and just feel where you feel it in your body, like a lot of like the somatic stuffs can be really helpful too. And it, like, even just noticing it without attachment. And it could be, most of the time, a lot of this stuff's inner child wounding. So it's just, sometimes it just wants to be witnessed and noticed. Like, you mentioned the abandonment wound. That was like the core wound for me. And I feel like in the last couple months, like I was just like God, source, universe, whatever you want to label, has just been, I'm like not allowed to have that anymore. It's been like purged out of me at another level. And it's like getting to that place to where it was a lot of inner child work, because when my parents divorced, I assigned all this meaning to my dad left, I'm not good enough, and this and this and this. And then I carried it over into my romantic relationships. And so I read something the other day. It's like, if you don't heal your child traumas, like your romantic relationships will continue to like show it again and again. It'll keep popping up. And that's what I had been noticing. I was like, okay, same man, different face. And it just kept popping up again and again and that can be something so simple as like, and I'm, real with all my clients too. Like in October, I probably cried more than I've cried like in the last, like, I don't know, like 5 years, because that's the energy right now around us, like not being able to take the density with us, like where we're going to, like, if you want to call it new earth or this new paradigm, like that we're creating, like we can't take the lie, because it's really just lies. It's really just untruths, because at the end of the day, like we are like sovereign beings. And then we come here to this dense reality and we have these experiences. And when we're little, if we have, people in our lives that don't have the tools, like they're in their unconscious and they're wounding as well, it's like we continue to repeat those generational trauma cycles until they get broken. And so we're really, really, what's happening on the planet right now in the last couple of months, like if you've been feeling like have been getting hit hard, like I've had clients who have either been like, okay, the physical body, the illness and like all that stuff is showing up, or the emotional, because it could be twofold. Like, for example, the frequencies of guilt, shame, and unworthy, those emotions resonate with viruses and bacteria. Like the frequencies, they're like Velcro to each other. And so this can be showing up in all kinds of different ways, but it's just really like learning to just listen to like what's right in front of you to do. And like for me, for example, too, it's been a lot of rest in this last month, just allowing like the processing of like the trauma, because the trauma is coming up for a lot of us right now. And it's really time to let go of those core wounds at a different level. Even if you think like, I already healed it. Like I thought I had handled it, but I definitely hadn't handled it yet.
Yeah, well, you don't know how deep it goes always. And same thing, the last couple of months for me have definitely been about healing and getting past the core wounding that has been going on for me. And I've seen it with people all around too. And everyone, just any clients that I've had recently, I'll just tell them like, oh, your energy is all over the place. Like you really need to slow down, and we need to do some clearing before we can even do any other kind of work, because your energy is just everywhere. And I think a lot of people have been feeling unbalanced, ungrounded, and just that way that they're here, 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 here. You know, it's like they're all over the place and they're not really truly focused in one specific area. So, how do you help people stay centered and focused? And one of our listeners actually asked this question in a Facebook group. She said, how do you stay balanced and grounded when the earth is constantly moving?
Yeah.
I thought that was an excellent question.
Yeah. And one thing I want to mention too is time, at least what's been coming through to me, is so accelerated. So if you feel a little wonky, you feel unstable, you're not alone. I feel the same way. I like, so the way I explain it, it's like there is like time is not linear as we know it. And so the way it's been shown to me is we're like healing like all these timelines. And so it's like we're not really getting breaks.
Yeah.
So as far as like getting grounded and balanced, like that's very specific to each person, right? Like there are different, meditations you can do, putting your feet onto the earth, Epsom salt baths, yoga, but again, it's so specific. So it really is about tuning into what does your body need right now? What does your soul need right now? Is it rest? Is it exercise? Is it a certain type of food? Like really starting to trust that and trust your own intuition. And I think you had asked like kind of how I work with people on that so like on the energy healing side of things, I do a lot of, not mine. Think so. I do a lot of work around conscious creation as well as the energy healing. So I found it to be very powerful to get into the end results of what we want to create, because then we're not problem solving. And so it's like tuning into how is it that you want to feel? What is it that you choose to consciously create just because you'd love to have it because it's in alignment with your heart and soul. And so the body and the mind don't know the difference between when we go there and experience it in the physical versus in like a meditative state. And so we can create that, and then we can look at, okay, where is there resistance to being able to just flow towards this desire and take inspired action? Because there's like multiple things that go into it. Sometimes the inspired action is missed because we think it's just going to show up on its own, which, I mean, it's like a combination of the cultivating, planting the energetic seeds, clearing out the resistance with the energy work, which it's the type of work that I do. It's called a rapid recode. There's basically all the like modalities I've learned, I'm kind of morphed them all into like my own. I don't even have a name for it necessarily, but it's all about rewiring the energy field at a DNA level, the cells, and really just clearing out that resistance and that trauma energy. And sometimes it involves like past life work. Sometimes it involves inner child work and part work. So we want one mono personality working together. And when we have trauma, we can have these different parts that are not necessarily fragmented, but they're split off from that main personality. So for example, you have this part that is like, oh, I really want and desire soulmate love. But you have this inner child that's like, it's not safe. Love's not safe. I'm going to get abandoned. I'm going to get left. And so you have these two parts fighting against one another. And then you may take 2 steps forward to take 2 steps back. And that's where like, those unconscious patternings come up, because at the end of the day, if we don't feel safe in our body, that's one of the most important things too, is being able to feel safe in the body and having the nervous system be on board. Because if the nervous system's on overdrive too, like it's just going to be, again, this like push pull. And so to circle back to your question, it's just so important to really, really tune in and seek out guidance and help. Like I have mentors that, help me as well. Cause sometimes it's like, sometimes we have bias when it comes to our own stuff. Mm-hmm. So tune into what's right for you, because at the end of the day, like you do truly know what's best for you. Like, do you need to reach out? Do you need to take a step back? Do you need to take a day off? Because like, if we look at this emotional trauma the same way we look at physical illness, if we have a sniffle or the flu, we take a week off or 2 weeks off or whatever. And we allow ourselves to rest. We watch TV, we read, we sleep. But when it comes to emotional trauma, it's just like, okay, we'll shove it down further and I'll deal with you later. It's like, what if we dealt with emotional trauma and wounds the same way we deal with the physical body? Because it's all tied together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to be able to address the emotional stuff, because when you just push it down, it doesn't go anywhere. It's
Nope.
still there. It's going to come out later when you least expect it and get triggered.
Yep. Tried and tested, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, I love that you're helping people to work through things like that. And you said so many things that I really agree with as far as healing the generational trauma. And you're really correct in what you're saying, in that a lot of people want so many things. They want to manifest a soulmate. They want to manifest the perfect job. They want to manifest all of these ideal things in their life. And so many people get stuck in one spot. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that they lack taking inspired action towards their dreams. And for a lot of people, inspired action can just be beginning to work with someone to work through the emotional wounding and trauma that's there. Because I feel like when you start to do that, a lot of things start falling into place and become easier for you, because it's easier to become clear about what you want. And I think it's easier to even be connected to who you truly are and your higher self when you start doing the work, because essentially you're clearing away a lot of limiting beliefs and stories that you've told yourself. So doing the work means that you're unlearning who you thought you were and really start learning who you truly are meant to be.
Absolutely. Identity is so powerful. And because our identity and structure is actually the foundation for how we show up. And when we have, it's kind of like that part analogy that I shared. Because if we have these identities that are rooted in all these things, it's like, those simply aren't you. Like you mentioned, the higher self, like that, your divine essence, that is what is you. And really what is, because it's like, all we have is the present moment. So and it's been an interesting balancing act for me, because I'm like, okay, how much like manifestation is too much, right? So it's really like getting in alignment with what your heart and soul like does want to bring to life, but also being in a place to where you are in the same energy when if it shows up, if it doesn't show up, and just like co-creating with the universe, because there's something that is just so powerful. Because if we're not happy in the now, we are putting out these silent instructions that the now is not good enough. And all we have is right now. And so it's just so powerful to get to that place. And I can also say I get it. So I actually was creating this program all around anxiety and depression. And so when I was tuning into like the healings and things, I actually realized that I had thought that I had unplugged from it. So I was like in this anxiety and depression for a week, and I couldn't figure out where it came from. And I was like, okay, I was supposed to, because I felt the trauma, but I've never been stuck in anxiety and depression. And so I know a lot of people are struggling with this right now. And so I know it was meant to kind of show me what people are going through. So, and when you're in that energy, like there's no part of you that wants to like consciously create, manifest, take inspired action. I can actually attest to that now. Like, yeah. I'm like, I literally don't want to do anything. And so one thing that I can share is, because what I did to help me move through that is I reached out for help, and then I just allowed myself to just like move through it. And I asked my higher self, I asked God to, just show me what I needed to do to be able to release. And eventually I found out what it was, but I just, my heart goes out to so many people right now, because there is so much of that going on right now, the anxiety and the depression and just what people are going through based on what's going on the planet. And if it is any consolation, I feel like we're headed in a very beautiful direction. But right now, it's just, if you are having these like wounds come up, like it's time to address them. And like you mentioned as well, they're not going to go away if you keep shoving them down. Like it really is time.
Yeah. And just like we were saying earlier, a lot of people say to me when I work with them, like, oh, I thought I took care of this. I thought I healed this. But we don't know how many layers of things there really are. And it starts not even just from this lifetime. I mean, we're talking past lifetimes that we've lived through. We're bringing all of that stuff with us. So the healing process is not going to be something that you snap your fingers and it's done. It's a process for a reason. And so you have to keep going back and doing the work. But the beautiful thing about it is when you do it, it gets easier, because when something comes up, then oh, as part of that wounding, I need to go and use the tools that I have to go back and work on that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I found to be very helpful in when that does come up, because I have that come up to, I'm like, gosh, I thought I handled this, is I've started to treat it as how I would treat like a little child. Like that is having, like, if you're seeing it like that, like, at least I don't think most of us would be like, hey, I already handled you. It would be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, come here. Like even just holding space and just like love and allowing that um that child to feel safe and like what that child needed in that moment. So we can actually, talking about again that time's not linear, we can actually go back to those events and we can either be an observer or we can go into it. It's not, I don't find it always necessary to go into like the deep, dark, dense stuff. Sometimes, like, when I'm working with people, like their higher self wants them to see something, but going in and we can actually do what I call as a change history, to where we're actually changing that particular event and we're experiencing from the wisdom we have now instead of where we were at that moment. And it just changes all of it.
Yeah, I love that, going back in and changing it. And I love what you said about the inner child too, because really, when you're wounding, the inner wounding shows up, that is your inner child crying out for help.
Yeah.
And for you to notice, hey, I'm still here and I still need to be cared for and I still need love. And I think a lot of us, I don't know, I think there's a stigma for certain people about healing the inner child, doing that kind of work. They just want to shove it down and move on. And I don't think that that is the best way to deal with things. But also, I think it's really, really important to take care of your inner child, because for a lot of people, they experience parents who maybe didn't take care of them the way that they should have. And so that is a way for you to be able to go back and take care of yourself the way that you deserve to be taken care of.
Yeah. And I think that I get it, because it's like like the idea of like this trauma coming up. I think so many of us are like, scary, like, and it's like, that's why we don't want to go there. Like I do, a friend, I won't share lots of details, but he he pretty much told me, like, he's like, I just can't even go there. Like, it's all around like love and stuff like that. And it's being masked with other things in his life to avoid sitting with what comes up, because for him, and I just listened, like I didn't say anything, but for him, like the idea of dealing with that right now is so terrifying, because it's like, whether it's grief or whatever emotion suppressed in the body, it's like, for some reason we are like conditioned to be afraid, especially men. My heart goes out to them too, because I do feel like it's like, okay, if you cry, you're weak, or if you show emotion, it's like, you're can't do it. So it's just very, it's very, very interesting. And I can share from experience that after a good cry, it's actually pretty therapeutic. And you're like, oh, okay. Like sometimes in this last month, which I have never experienced, like I've had it to where like stuff has come up and I've cried for 20, 30 minutes. And then after that, I wipe my eyes and I literally go about my day and I'm like, okay, like nothing happened. Like
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Like I'm like, my dog's looking at me. I'm like, please don't check me into a home. Like, I'm like, I promise I'm not crazy. He's like, but mom, you're crying like every day. I'm like, I don't know, the energy of October.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think a lot of people, not just men, I think a lot of people have been conditioned that to cry is weakness,
yeah.
or, that it's selfish to, well, because if you've been raised by parents who were kind of manipulative, a lot of parents will turn it around on them like, you better stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about,
Yeah.
or, don't express your feelings because that makes me feel bad. So we get that whole gaslighting and manipulation of, it's not safe for you to express your feelings because it makes someone else uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap, and we have to learn how to ignore that inner voice that says, no, you can't cry because it's weak, or you don't want to make anyone else feel uncomfortable or make you feel uncomfortable. You have to get your emotions out. You just have to.
Yeah. And then it becomes to where, because people ask me, like, are we going to be doing healing work forever? I personally don't believe we will be. I think we're always going to be growing and evolving, and emotions are going to come up. Maybe, when you press up against those uncomfortable edges to where you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, that's different. But the trauma healing, I do not believe we will be doing this forever. No, I don't.
That's good news.
Yeah, I really don't. I actually believe that we are reverse aging, and I do feel like we are healing these generational wounds, these past, like if everything's in the way that I can best describe it is if everything's happening in this present moment, in the here and now. We like to label things as humans. We love labeling stuff. It helps us wrap our minds around it. But if everything's happening in the here and now, in the present moment, it doesn't matter if it was past life. It doesn't matter if it was generational. It doesn't matter if it was, if a future event, whatever you want to like, it's like, and you don't have to go digging for this stuff. It's going to show up when it's ready. Like, I mean, I've in the past, like I've had sessions just to have them, like when I was kind of going through the beginning phases of my journey, but I'm like, that stuff's going to show up on its own. So the cool thing is like, you really like, it's going to show up when it's time and when it's ready. And the best way that I can help you to navigate that is using your emotions as your compass. So does it feel expansive? Does whatever coming up feel like contracting? Does it feel like stiff in your body? What's coming up for you to see? And sometimes simply, again, just acknowledging it from that detached place to where you're just sending it love can really help with it. And sometimes you do need to go a little deeper and do a little bit more work. Sometimes there's something that your soul wants you to identify and see at a deeper level. And sometimes it's just energy coming up out of your body that just is ready to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. So I want to talk more about your podcast because I'm very interested about what you talk about. And so your podcast is called Upleveled as F. And I said I don't say that word on here just because I know we have some moms who listen to this podcast while they're taking their kids back and forth to and from school. But I would love to know more about that podcast. And I know you said it's a weekly podcast, what you talk about, and if anyone's interested in listening to it.
Yeah. So my business partner, her name's Emmy Hernandez. She is a soulmate love and relationship coach expert. And she has her backgrounds all in like business stuff. Like she was in the tech world before. So it's funny because a lot of her clients come to her for love and relationships and end up being business clients as well for coaching too. Cause there's a lot of people starting businesses right now. So we actually, we came together because we both have we have similar training, but we have different areas of like our genius, I guess, if you will. So I'm very I'm like anything woo woo, anything energy healing, and all like the life purpose, soul alignment stuff is all my jam. And then for Emmy, it's the love and like the business coaching type stuff. So we were like, we were thinking about it because it's all around the conscious creation. And it was like, well, who doesn't want to like up level in all areas of their life? Like who doesn't want to have loving relationships? I don't know. Like, I mean, I do. Who doesn't want to be able to manifest and call in more money than they can spend? I don't know anybody who doesn't want to. And then, who doesn't want to feel fulfilled in what they're waking up and doing every day? And then health, who doesn't, like, you can't do any of those without your health. So I actually also, which I don't do as much kind of like, I don't talk about as much, but I actually do have a background in like a transformational nutrition coach, and I do energetic allergy healing. So between the two of us, we have those like 4 pillars, if you will. And so we have conversations around money, love, health, and life purpose to help people in all areas of those. And lately I've been bringing on guests to kind of mix it up a little bit. So just interviews. I had one last week, and I'm excited for that to air here pretty soon. But it was just all around like decluttering and just release. It's kind of a very similar conversation to this around just releasing like relationships that don't serve you, things in your space that don't serve you, and how it all just translates like it's all intertwined. So we just try to, we have very candid conversations. I'm going to be completely honest. Like if, sometimes the cuss words upset you, it's probably not the podcast for you. We're very like raw and uncensored in our approach, but it's also very like, we try to just put as much wisdom and value in it as we possibly can, so that we can, provide people with things that maybe we wish, our younger self would have known. So
Yeah, it sounds awesome. It really does. It sounds like everybody needs to go and check out that podcast because there is a lot of very much added value to what you guys are doing. So I love that you're doing that, and I love that you're helping people to heal. So if people want to perhaps work with you or follow you, or maybe they want to listen to your podcast, what is the best way to do all of that?
yeah, so I do one-on-one sessions for now. That is probably because I have a 6 month and then a year-long program as well. The just like the one-off one-on-one sessions, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing that, but for right now I still am. So if anybody does feel like it's in alignment with them, you're more than welcome to go to my website. I also have some freebies on my website. I love providing, free content for people as well. So I have a couple I mentioned the recode. So like the type of energy work I do, I have some audios, like I have an immune system booster. I have a money recode and an emotional recode. So if any of those resonate, those are all free on my website. And yeah, the podcast, I mean, anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you should be able to find it. So
Awesome. So I will have all of your links in the show notes. So that way, if you want to go check out the freebies that Amanda has on her website, you can go and do that. If you want to listen to her podcast, or if you want to work with her, you're just one click away from being able to do all of that. So you can go and check that out in the show notes. Well, this was such a great conversation today. And one of the things I always like to ask our guests before we end the show is just to leave our listeners with a little nugget of wisdom to take with them for the day. So if you have any words of wisdom for our listeners, what would that be?
Absolutely. So the best advice I could give, and what I would have loved to know younger at a younger age, is just really what's best for you, and really start to tap into your heart, to your soul, and go within for those answers, and really work with your higher self on bringing that stuff up, whether it's journaling or, just tuning into that energy, those frequencies, because you have a unique soul frequency, a unique soul blueprint that only you can bring to this planet. And so it's just so important for us all to be shining our own unique light, and just really, so we can just bring, more light and love to the planet. So.
All right. I love that. That's beautiful wisdom. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all of the wisdom that you've shared with us.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you having me on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today as well. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. Please leave a positive review from wherever you're listening. And the greatest compliment you can pay me is to share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Don't forget to follow me on social media. And if you want to work with me, you can go to my website, melissaoatman.com. And if you really like this podcast, you can join me over on Patreon to have 5 episodes a week. The link will be in the show notes. I hope that you guys are having a beautiful day from wherever you're listening. As always, I am sending you so much love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.